are you in complete control of your website and your domain name? How many of you actually truly are, even if you think you are? Let's today talk about your website and how to avoid being held hostage by your web developer. What goes on behind the scenes with your website? I know, boring stuff, but it's vitally important that you understand what is happening with your website and with your domain name to avoid your website from being shut down or being taken hostage by your web developer. It happens all too often. Have you ever had your domain name or website been taken hostage by your web developer? Share with me if you have such a story, because you are certainly not the only one. All too often, we get new clients calling us or emailing us, and they're angry, they're upset. They're feeling really ripped off, and their web person suddenly is, either has disappeared on them and they don't have access to their website, or their web developer has decided that, I'll relinquish control as long as you pay me some money. And so what happens is the clients don't understand, how did this happen? I own my own website. How can this be happening? But it does. And it happens way too much. At the end of the day, it makes these people feel very leery of working with web developers, rightfully so. And they're also worrying, are we going to be a rip-off artist as well? So rest assured, we are not. We don't set things up to have you not have any control over your stuff. And so I want to explain today what you need to know to avoid this from happening. So whether you already have your own website or you're about to create a website, this is really, really important information for you to know. One of the things that I hear often is, my web guy just takes care of all of that. He just handles it all for me. And I can totally see the draw of that happening, where it's in safe hands, and it's just one less thing for you to have to worry about, and that's totally fine. That we have a lot of clients who feel that way about us, where everything is safely in their hands, except for one thing, and I'm going to explain what that is. But first, it's just really important to understand that having a website is an important step to building your brand and your business online, right? It's your online identity. It's the equivalent to having a brick and mortar store. Understandably, not everybody has the skills or the time to build their own website, nor should they. I'm one of those people who firmly believe that you should not be building your own website for many, many, many reasons. And that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother show. What should and often does happen is that you hire somebody to help you with that task. But it's important to ensure that of understanding what it is that they're responsible for, what is it that they have control over, and what is it that you actually have control over. And often this, there's a disconnect there. There's assumptions that are made, and I'm here to clear that up. So if you have any questions at all about control over your website, please do leave a comment in the comment section. I really do want to hear from you. But first of all, it's important to understand that there are two components involved in a website. That first component is a domain name. eVisionmedia.ca is our domain name. And then your, what domain name that you would have, www.yourbusinessname.com, whatever that might be. That's one component that you have to have in order to have a business website. And then the second component is the web hosting. So the web hosting is actually where your website files are sitting. That's where we have the ability to see your website. There's files, all of your HTML files and your CSS files and your images and your PDFs and your videos and your audios. All of that kind of stuff has to sit somewhere in order for people to be able to access it online. And that is sitting in a web hosting account. A good way to think about the importance of and how to relate your website and your domain name is by comparing it with a brick and mortar store. So for example, we've got your your physical world, the brick and mortar store here, and your virtual world, the website environment here. So in a physical world, you're renting the premises, for your location, right? You have a physical location that you rent that people come into and do business with you. Where in the virtual world, that's where the web hosting is. Your web presence, your website is sitting in a web environment, and of which you are renting that space as well. And then kind of what you do is you move goods and products into your physical world. There's got to be something there in order for people to do business with you. And in the web's environment, that's where we have our documents, our web pages, and our PDF files, like I was just talking about. All of those documents need to be sitting in that environment. And then on your brick and mortar store, you put up a sign saying we're open for business. This is our business name. And that gets put up as a sign over top of your storefront, right? And then in your virtual world with your website, that is your domain name. The domain name is kind of like the sign that is indicating that you are open for business and people are going to that domain name to find your website. Let's first quickly talk about the domain name. It's claimed through a domain name registrar. So many of us know a domain name registrar as like GoDaddy or NetFirms or Network Solutions. Like there's hundreds of domain name registrars. And actually, all of these people are resellers of Tucows. If you've ever heard of Tucows, that's kind of the top tier. And then you've got your NetFirms and your GoDaddy and all of those other kind of domain registrars under that. So that's where you get your domain name from. And you need to keep paying a yearly fee in order for you to be able to use that domain name. If you don't pay your fee, then you don't have use of that domain name and anybody can grab it from there, right? You don't have ownership over that name. So if you stop paying, you've stopped the ability to use that domain name. You can't just purchase it, a one-time only purchase. That doesn't happen in this kind of a world. The important part to understand about your domain name is that the legal holder of that domain name is the person or organization that is listed in that domain name's registrant as the owner. So when you register a domain name, the person who puts their name in as the owner of that domain name, that is giving you that legal use to use that domain name for your business. And it shows up if you do a who is search. The owner of that domain name is the person who registered it, and they are technically the legal holder of that domain name. Oftentimes, the business owners themselves did not register their own domain name. Therefore, the person who did register the domain name is technically the legal owner of that domain name until it expires. So double check. Do you know who the name is, the registrant name is of your domain name? You want to make sure that your business name or your full name or your contact information are on the account through GoDaddy, NetFirms, wherever it is, and that the domain registrant contacts, especially the owner of the contacts, is yours. Do not have your web developer or anybody else, your VA or anybody, register that domain name for you unless they put your name in, your contact information in, and your credit card information in as well. Otherwise, they have control over your domain name. And also make sure that the email address that is associated with your domain name is one that is accessible to you or somebody on your team. So for us, it would be, I would make sure that info@evisionmedia.ca is the email address that is registered to our domain name and not some Gmail address or, one of my team members' email address or anything like that. If it isn't set up that way, you are vulnerable for having your domain name be held hostage. And this has happened more times than I can count. It just happened really recently with a client who hired us. They had their own website. and they decided that they wanted something different, and they hired us. And in that process of changing over to having us take care of stuff, they discovered that their domain name was not registered under their own name. It was registered by their previous web developer, and that developer decided, I'm going to get some money from you before I give you that control and transfer the domain name into your name. And so it ended up being a very stressful, drawn out situation. The client wasn't aware of all of that back when they first made that initial contractual agreement with that person, and that person did put in there, that they have ownership. And so you have to make sure that you read the fine print of your contracts as well. You have any kind of stories about that where you had to go through hoops and pay a lot of money in order to get back control of your domain name? We're more caught up in the business and the marketing and getting the website up, and it's these little details that can really mess people up with when they're not thinking about that control. And notice I'm not talking about ownership of your domain name and ownership of your website. That actually is a whole nother topic of discussion. So let's talk about web hosting now. There's different ways that your website can be hosted, and it's important to understand how it is being hosted. What are the drawbacks to that particular way that it's being hosted, and what kind of options that you have? So, instead of just jumping in and grabbing whatever is the latest and greatest as far as tools are concerned, or what makes it look easy or simple or cheap, think it through and make sure that you understand, the ramifications, or, the benefits and the not so good benefits of making those choices. Now, I need to kind of preface things a little bit here, clarify a little bit that, if you are a larger organization or corporation or a big nonprofit organization, there are other options available to you. And so take that with what I'm about to tell you about what I'm about to explain is more in reference to our solo entrepreneurs, our micro businesses, the smaller businesses. It doesn't encompass every single option available out there. So I'm just trying to make it more simpler to what is pertaining to our world. So basically you have three types of of web hosting options available to you for those entrepreneurs and small businesses. The first choice is using a third-party service, like it's called SaaS, software as a service. And typically we know these kinds of web hosting services as like Wix, and you got Squarespace and Weebly, and a myriad of others, but those are kind of the primary ones. And so that is called a third-party hosting, SaaS, software as a service. It is a very popular choice. It has a lot of draws to it. You do have a monthly hosting option. You have to pay monthly in order to do that, but it's drag and drop. It's nice and simple. You can do your own website that way. Like it does on the surface have a lot of benefits to it. The thing that you need to be aware of is that it's hosted on their platform. Therefore, you have zero control and zero ownership of what is hosted on their platform. And it's so important that you understand that. It's fine and dandy for when nothing is going wrong, when everything is working the way it's supposed to. But what happens if you suddenly, unknowingly, break their terms and conditions? Or don't pay your bill or whatever? They can just turn off your website. Boom, done, gone. And you have no control over that because you have, breached their terms and conditions somehow. Or not as likely of a scenario, but it is possible that they could suddenly go out of business and they shut down, boom, your website is gone. That's probably, a scenario that wouldn't happen. They would probably give you lots of notice, but even if they did give you notice, or if you decided that you wanted to move to a different platform, like over to WordPress or something else, you do not have an easy way of being able to transfer your website over to another platform. And that's because you don't have access to what you need to be able to access in order to make that transfer. You can't just do an export. You literally have to recreate your website in a different platform. There's no easy way to move it over. And then, of course, as I mentioned, they have 100% ownership and control over your website. Yes, you can go in and you can add in new content and you can delete pages and add pages, but they have control over and access to your database, your CSS files, your FTP files, and all of that stuff. That they have ownership and control over that. You don't. You can't go in and do any customizations aside from what they allow you to customize. Even more technically, any updates usually cannot be done by third parties since the private hosting entity cannot allow others into their platform. This handcuffs the website owners even further. Yes, that's exactly it. And it is like a handcuff situation, isn't it, Daniel? Where, you as our SEO expert in our eVision Media team, it's almost impossible to work with these third-party platforms to fully SEO optimize a website. Because of you're literally working with your hands behind your back because they only give you so much control and so much access to what you need to be able to do in order to properly SEO optimize those websites. And the second option is hosting your website on a third-party website server, such as HostGator, HostMonster, GoDaddy. All of those kinds of places are all web hosts. This is different than your SaaS types of websites, where here you have much, much more control. And the reason for that is because they give you access to the cPanel and your database. And therefore, with that kind of access, you have complete ability to control and customize your website. So it can look at however you want it to look. They're not giving you any constraints. They're not handcuffing you in any way. And the beauty is that they are taking care of the technical stuff. They're making sure that your website is operational 24 hours a day, like 99.9% of the time uptime. And you can come and go as you please. You can do whatever you want with your website, within limits. So obviously, if you intend on being a spammer, then, obviously you're going to get shut down for that. But, you don't have to worry. Just like with a Wix website, you don't have to worry about the technical stuff. They take care of that for you. That's a huge benefit to it. It's super important. And I should have mentioned this also with your SaaS type of website, and for this type of website, when you're signing up for a new account with these kinds of third-party services and third-party hosting, make sure that you're signing up under your name, your email address, your phone number, and your credit card. Do not let your web developer or your VA or your web designer or anybody sign up for you unless they are signing up using your name and your credit card information. And that is so critical. And that is where that client ran into big time problems, because it was all under their web developer's name. He took hostage of it. He got a little persnickety, didn't like the idea that he was being replaced, and just said, "Hey, I'll give it back to you if you can pay me lots of money for it." Karen, I have not heard this before. Great information, Susan and Daniel. Thank you, Karen. And I'm quite positive that you're not the only one. And so please do share this. If you know of anybody who needs to hear this information, please take a moment and give me a like and share this to your social media followers so that they can better understand what is going on behind the scenes. It's so easy for us to be complacent, or I don't even know if that's the word, but just trust. Sometimes we're just too trusting, and we trust that all of that stuff is being taken care of by that person, and it never occurs to us that bad things can happen. That is, your second choice, and then there's a third choice. And that one is when the website is hosted on the web developer's own server. This doesn't happen a lot, but it has happened. There's kind of two different scenarios that happen here. Either that web host is a reseller of GoDaddy or HostMonster, HostGator, or anything like that, where they have they're paying these guys in bulk in order to resell a portion of that server to their clients, and so they're making money off of you, and so that's one. Or the other scenario is when the web developer actually has his own web server sitting in his basement, home, whatever, or in a external office area. What happens, especially when it's a reseller scenario, is they often do not give you any kind of access. They don't allow others to have access to your web hosting files. And the reason for that is because they've got 10, 20, 30 other clients that are also hosted in that space. And so if they give access to one, that one person would have access to all. So they are purposely, for privacy reasons, and you don't want them to be giving that information out anyway, but they are preventing you from having that 100% control that I was talking about in option number 2. And so be careful about that. If you're working with a reseller, ask them, do you have full control over the cPanel and FTP access? Because there's different ways that you can set it up. So just make sure if you have access to your cPanel, then you know that you have the ability to export your website and move it and have full control over it to another hosting situation if you no longer want to have that work relationship with that web developer. Now, if they are hosting it on their own server, my only concern about that is security and downtime. Security, they have to be on top of it 100% to make sure that your website is being protected through a firewall. As you know, we are being bombarded on a daily basis for web bots and files, nefarious files, and people trying to take advantage of vulnerabilities on our website. So that security has to be, on top of, taken care of all the time. So option 1 and 2, they do that for you. You don't have to worry about that so much at that server level. Somebody who is hosting and serving the website in their basement may not be 100% as attentive. They might be. You just have to ask, right? I'm not making an assumption one way or the other. You just have to ask and make sure that that is under control. The other problem that I'm concerned about is what happens if their power goes out one day. Power goes out. And if their power goes out on their and their web server also goes down, then your website goes down. You and everybody else who is hosted on their web server. So more than likely, they have controls in place to prevent that from happening, like backup generators and things like that. But you just have to make sure that you understand the environment that you're in. I would be a little hinky about that kind of stuff. The biggest problem is that they have 100% control over your website. They can easily hold hostage because nothing is in your name. It's all in their name. It's all sitting in their files under their control. I can't even say if there's a chance that you aren't going to be working with that person in the future. Like that we won't know that. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. And so you just have to make sure that what's happening now is that you are in control of your website. So does any of this ring a bell for you? Like, have you experienced anything like this in the past where, you had a website or a domain name and things fell apart with the person that you were working with, and suddenly you don't know how to get a hold of get access to your domain name registrar, or you can't get in and do any updates to your website because maybe your web person just disappeared, and it's amazing how often that happens. I just don't quite understand it. Anybody who is a client of ours here at eVision Media, we always use a third-party web hosting service like HostGator, HostMonster, all of those different kinds of website services. And in fact, we've got a list of recommended services that we use with our clients. On our website, we have a list of all of our recommended web hosts, and sometimes we do sign up on behalf of our clients, but we use their name, their email address, their phone number, their credit card information. I have never done this. I've never wanted to be in a position of even being able to hold hostage. And I understand the reasoning behind, like there might be some web developers who are watching this and going, well, yeah, but, and they might feel like they are very justified in putting stuff in their name. And the biggest justification is, well, I want to make sure I get paid for my efforts. And so understandably, and that's why we develop our websites on a development server first under our control. And then once we get paid, then we move the website over to their web hosting account under their control. And then some people will justify that, well, my client doesn't know how to keep all of that organized. They don't even understand passwords and stuff like that. Again, very justifiable that you have somebody who is helping you with that and keeping it all organized, but that doesn't mean that should be out of your control. It should still be in your name and email address, and use a trusted resource. So if you are working with a web person right now that you don't really trust, then give me a call. Let us know if we can help you. There are other factors to know and understand about direct ownership of your domain name and website. And as I said, I'm going to talk about that in a couple of weeks' time at the next Tea Time tip about ownership, because that's different than control. And you may be surprised at what you may or may not actually own on your website. And leave a comment below, share this with your followers and let them know so that they understand the kind of environment that they're working in. Do your homework, go check and see who is actually registered as the registrant owner of your domain name, and how is your website hosted, and are you comfortable with that? And is it under your contact information, your name, and your credit card? That's it for today. Thanks so much. I appreciate you joining me, and we'll talk to you next time. Okay, bye-bye for now.